Metrics are really interesting around content because to date we look at viewership, right? And it's how we define a view, how long is a piece of content watched. But this is really an area where we could go a lot deeper. What kind of sharing is being done around content? It's a lot easier to like a piece of content than it is to actually write a comment or reblog it or repost it. And certainly for this generation, reposting something is an emblem about yourself. It's very personal. It suddenly means that piece of content speaks about you. And so that should have a higher value, if you will, than just liking something. So we're just at the beginning stages of, I think, being able to really evaluate content. What's good content? Where's content resonating? And I think right now we look at things like ratings, and we definitely look at buzz and critical acclaim, but more and more, as we get better tools, I think we'll be able to measure real human behavior around content. Am I sharing this?
I think we're still trying to figure out what's the best way of measuring the success, particularly with these more sophisticated forms of content-driven digital advertising. I certainly think that impressions and clicks feel completely inadequate. I think people's propensity to share is very interesting. I think we're going to need a kind of like a balanced scorecard of a number of different metrics, but in the end, what we're trying to achieve is impact and memorability. Those are the underlying things we're trying to measure, and I think advertisers will most want to work with publishers who have got an engaged audience where that kind of deep engagement can lead to impact and messages which consumers really remember.
How we measure content today is not what it will be in the future. Today we are using surrogates, and I think the surrogates that you use or proxies is dependent on what your objectives are. So it could be shareability, it could be likability, it could be a range or a combination of both. I think that goes to what the objective of the content is. But what the future, and particularly when we have attribution modeling in place and multi-touch attribution, we're going to tie that content to sales and to commerce. And then that's really the only KPI that you need. At the end of the day, it's not to say that brand health metrics don't matter, but I think you can get more to the short-term commerce as your KPI for content, while at the same time tracking what I would do then is more those long-term brand health metrics.
Great content for us is about sort of blending art and science. So the art is, are you creating something you're proud of, that you feel is important, that you're telling great stories, that it's beautiful and like it's content that matters, and you sort of know when you see that kind of content. I think, you know, what sort of digital has given us is the science piece, that we can really understand the data of what good versus great content is and how people interact with it and how people share it. And I don't think it's as simple as time spent or like there's not a metric that you can say, well, that's great content as a result of someone spending a bunch of time or sharing it a lot. But I think if you look at the total pie and you look at all the different ways that people interact, you can set some benchmarks around what your best content is.
Platforms like ours, where we know exactly what's happening, we know exactly who's watching it, how they're consuming it, where they're consuming it, gives us an ability to really understand what consumers are doing at a higher rate than others. And I think having people consume content with passion, which means they're watching lots of it, lots of customers watching it, is what we're going to look to try to achieve.
So when you look at the metrics that many people use to judge great content, it's everything from shareability, likes, forwards, things like that. But for Kraft Foods, it's really about, are we moving product? It has to equate to sales at the store level, because all the positive KPIs and metrics that we can measure don't mean anything unless we're selling more product. So for Kraft Foods, it's really ends up in store, are we moving product?
From the end of the day, we need to ask whether somebody paid attention, whether they were engaged with it, whether it was impactful, and we need to figure out how to measure that. And I think that's really important. Shareability may be a piece of it, but shareability should not be the only signal of success.
Ratings have been a problem since the earliest days of television, but the best metric, if you can get it, is ratings of who's watching and, for the first time, whether they're actually engaged. Well, not just that the set's on or the screen's on in front of them, but if they're engaged in the content. And that's the best metric, and needless to say, the most difficult to get.